Good morning, and thank you very much for coming to Toronto Police Headquarters. Today, I'd like to introduce to you the officer in charge of Homicide Squad, Inspector Hank Idsinga, who will be updating us on the death investigation of Honey and Barry Sherman.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, everyone, for being here. 2 years ago, on December the 13th, 2017, Barry and Honey Sherman were murdered in their home. The police investigation has been and continues to be active and ongoing. The work of the private investigative team hired by the family at the outset has been completed. The Sherman family appreciates the hard work and dedication of the police officers working on this case. They are committed to working with us and have full confidence that the Toronto Police Service will solve this crime. To date, investigators have obtained 38 judicial authorizations, which have resulted in the searches of residential and commercial properties, electronic devices, and the production of 73 individual records. 150 items have been submitted to the Centre of Forensic Sciences for testing. 243 witnesses have been interviewed. 4 terabytes of security video has been obtained. 205 tips have been provided directly to the police from the public. 343 tips have been provided so far to the police via the private investigative team. 701 investigative actions have been assigned, but we are still asking for help. The family and the police urge anyone who has reliable information regarding the murders, no matter how small or unimportant that information may seem, to please contact the police through their usual channels, either anonymously through Crime Stoppers at 416-222-TIPS or directly to the Homicide Squad at 416-808-7400. We have also set up a direct email address for this case, and tips can be provided via shermantips@torontopolice.on.ca. This email address will only be accessed by police investigators directly assigned to the Sherman investigation. I would encourage anyone who has provided tips in the past to the private investigative team to please resubmit those tips directly to the police. Last October, the Sherman family established a collaborative reward program to assist the police in their investigation. Should any tip or information lead to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible who perpetrated the murders, the Sherman family, in consultation with the Toronto Police Service, will be responsible for the dissemination of any reward money. It is important to note that Crime Stoppers is an anonymous reporting mechanism. It is preferable under circumstances such as these to report any tips or information directly to investigators. The Sherman family would also like to thank the public and the media for their continuing support during this difficult time. They request that their privacy be respected. Accordingly, they will not be answering any questions at this time. I would like to thank the Sherman family for their continued support and patience during this very lengthy investigation. Solving this case has always been the priority and responsibility of the Toronto Police Service, and our thoughts are always with the victims and their loved ones. Given that this is still a very active investigation, there's little by way of investigative details that I am willing to discuss. I will try to answer any other relevant questions.
Inspector, can you speak to just how harming or damaging speculation can be if it's out there with regard to maybe even inaccurate information, and how that may give false hope to a family? Does that cause you concern?
It does absolutely cause me concern. As you well know, Steve, we don't operate on speculation or theories. We operate on evidence. And I've said in other investigations, and I'll say this in this investigation, if you don't hear it from the primary investigator's mouth or the major case manager's mouth, then you've got to take everything with a grain of salt. And I can't imagine how disturbing it must be for the family and loved ones of these victims to continually read about speculation in the media. So I understand there's a job to be done, but it does make it very difficult for them.
Are you close to a motive, Hank? Are you close to a motive?
Again, I can't get into what the evidence is telling us. There are a lot of theories. There is a lot of speculation. I just can't get into that right now.
You said you got 243 tips. The investigative team, private investigative team, got 243 tips. Now that that's ended, why do you need those people to resubmit those tips?
I believe it was 343 tips, and I want to be sure that we have all of the tips that were provided in the past. So I just want to encourage people, if you have submitted that information, please do resubmit it to us so that we can go through all of that information.
On the information that's been...
and his team are no longer doing this. I talked to him an hour ago and he hasn't been informed of that. Has he been informed in that hour since?
Okay, that's between the Sherman family and that investigative team. I'm not going to speculate on any communication between them.
You did say in your statement that their investigation is complete.
Correct.
Can you elaborate on what that means?
That's the information I've been provided by the Sherman family.
Is the tip line still available, still open, the $10 million tip line that Mr. Greenspan started about a year ago?
This is the issue here, why we're here today. I believe that tip line is now offline, and that's why I'm providing this alternative for people to pass their information on to us.
Sorry, so on the private investigation being complete, when were you made aware that it was?
Again, I don't want to get into what's been going on between the Sherman family and that private investigative team.
But can you say if the information that you've now received has, can you say that it's expanded any type of working theory? Has it contributed to what you believe may have happened? Has there been a clear improvement in the investigation on whatever's been given to you so far?
Yeah, again, I don't want to speculate on that. We have received a lot of information from them. We are still going through a lot of that information, and we'll see where it brings us.
Are you frustrated with where you're at now? It's been 2 years.
Sorry, say that again?
Are you frustrated with the progress in the investigation that has been 2 years?
It has been 2 years, but that's not unusual, especially in an investigation such as this. We've had some high-profile investigations in the past that have taken. I believe the Glenn Davis case was 2.5, almost 3 years before that case was broken. I've had murder cases where I've made an arrest 4 years after the fact. And as we know, we have a cold case squad that can make arrests and close cases decades afterwards. I don't think this case is going to fall into that category, but there is a lot of material that has to be gone through before we get to a conclusion.
You
Are
mentioned
members
the
of
Glenn
the
Davis
Sherman
case.
family, other members of the Sherman family, or even the extended Sherman family, who have not been cooperative with your investigation?
No.
Everyone's been
No, the Shermans have been terrific with us. They've been very cooperative, and especially under the circumstances that they're dealing with. I applaud them very heartily for that.
You mentioned the Glenn Davis case. Do you see similarities with this case in that case?
I refer to the Glenn Davis case only to put things into perspective timeline-wise. Glenn Davis case, I was working in Homicide when that occurred. I believe it was 2007. It took 1.5 years before the information started really rolling in, and then another year after that before arrests were made. So I'm not drawing any parallels other than timelines to that case.
Do you have a working theory on this?
I think I've already said there's lots of speculation and there's lots of theories, so we're still combing through a lot of information. So
Detective Yim said in court in April and October, when I was asking him questions, that we have a working theory of the case, we have an idea of what happened. Has that changed perhaps?
well, again, it refers to what you're discussing as what happened in the case. That can go in a million different directions, okay?
Inspector Lee, I was said the other day that there's a lot of interest in this case because it's a whodunit. But there are many whodunits out there. So can you just reassure all those other families who've got lost loved ones where the murderers are still outstanding, they're all done, and you've got an interest in all those cases and not just this case.
Yeah, I'm, and you and I have talked about it before, Steve. I'm very loath to call a case a cold case, or I definitely won't say a case is ever closed, even after conviction and upon appeal. Cases are always open. We're always open to new information coming in to help with those cases. And unsolved cases are still always actively being worked on. We're still always actively looking for more information.
Inspector,
Can
can
you
you
tell
give
us
us
how
an idea
many
how many
officers
people?
continue to work on the case actively?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. It really is, depending on what information comes in and what evidence comes in. If we have to expand and involve other officers from other units, from other services, that's exactly what we do. So it's a changing number, literally day by day.
The $10 million tip, a tip line reward that was offered by Greenspan. So there's no longer a $10 million reward being offered, is that correct?
No, the family is still offering. The family was behind that $10 million reward. The estate of the Shermans, that reward is still outstanding. And all we're doing now is moving the responsibility for collecting the information back to the police service where it should belong. And at the end of the day, it's still the Shermans' responsibility to decide what they want to do with that tip money.
In your words, what would you say is the most, in your words, what would you say is the most challenging aspect of this investigation? What has held up solving this crime?
The sheer volume of information is overwhelming. And trying to gather all of that information, we really, in a lot of murder investigations, we're the gatherers of the information, and then we have to go through it all and decipher it and see what's information versus evidence. And there's just a massive volume of information in relation to this case.
U.S. investigators on this case?
I'm not going to comment about that at all, sorry.
Do suspects or suspects?
Again, I'm not going to comment about that at all, sorry.
Just a little bit about what it's been like working on a case like this while there's a private investigation going on simultaneously.
It's a very unique situation. We've seen private investigators doing some overlapping work in cases in the past, but not a dedicated team like we dealt with in this case. And there's been some sharing of information, but at the end of the day, it's the Toronto Police Service that has to resolve this investigation and has to present this investigation and the evidence in court. So we'll take whatever information we can get to further that.
How would you characterize it? Would you say it was a hit, the murder?
I don't think I'd go down that road. Sorry.
Can you talk about just how this changes things now for you in the work that you're doing going forward now that the private investigation is gone?
Having the tips come directly to us and avoiding that any delay in receiving that information is going to be huge for us. So I anticipate the next several weeks are going to be very, very busy going through a lot of information.
So Inspector, did the private investigation hinder the police's investigation? Did it slow you guys down then over the last little while?
No, our investigation is carried on just as it should have carried on, and we've made some progress, and we'll continue to carry on.
Inspector, did the family fire the Greenspan team?
Again, that's a question for the Sherman family.
But just to go back on the issue about tips coming in, Inspector, obviously tips are going to be able to flow directly to you as opposed to going through the private investigators. Can you elaborate a little bit more on just how much of that occurred? How much of a hindrance was it, if at all, about certain tips perhaps going to the private investigators as opposed to directly to you? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, we've always said that the tips should be coming to us, and there's been some overlap between the tips we've received and the tips the private investigative team received, and we'd like those tips directly to us and avoid those time delays and avoid that any potential editing of the tips or continuity of the information. So I think this will be a great help to us, and I wouldn't characterize them going to the private investigative team as a hindrance, but this is certainly more beneficial for our purposes.
You said one of the big challenges in this case was just the sheer volume of information, but obviously you're asking for more information. So is it that you've been getting the wrong information?
We've been getting a lot of great information from a lot of different sources. And like I said, I anticipate we're going to be getting a lot more information, but that's what we're here to do. We're here to intake that information and work with it and decipher it and follow up with that information, so.
Reassure the public right now that nothing was lost in this investigation. This was done professionally by professional investigators. You didn't miss, as far as you know, there's nothing to miss in this case.
Paul, as you know, no investigation is perfect. I'll never make that claim, but I will say that the homicide squad from the Toronto Police Service were present at the scene the night that the victims were found and have been working on it diligently ever since. So.
The family had been critical initially after the death, saying that they believe police missed some things. It seemed there was some strained relationship there. Can you talk about the relationship that police have now with the Sherman family?
We're in daily communication with members of the Sherman family and have a very good relationship with them right now.
One more question?
Can I just ask you to clarify what you said about the hit question? Detective Gomes did say it was a targeted murder instead of person that being, are you still of that view?
I would call it a targeted murder, yes, definitely. Okay, thank you.